Mr. Aj Vignaraja, Head of Operations and Remote Sensing Metrics and Senior Advisor at Stax, who will moderate our first panel discussion for the day. Aj founded the Colombo office of Stax in 2005 and continues to advise teams of consultants, analysts, and technical specialists who work directly or in conjunction with their US colleagues to support Stax's client engagements around the world. Aj's expertise includes the Asia-Pacific region, where he advises corporate clients on market entry and expansion in high-growth segments such as education, financial services, and manufacturing, with particular emphasis on data analytics and consumer-driven insights. Before establishing the Colombo office, Aj served as a director in the Stax's Chicago office, where he worked with financial services clients on growth opportunities and competitive challenges, and evaluated investment opportunities for private equity clients. Aj came to Stax from the Boston Consulting Group, where he helped formulate business strategies for Fortune 500 clients in financial services and industrial goods. Aj holds an MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University and a BA in economics with honors from Princeton University. Aj, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. I'd like to say thanks to the speakers this morning for painting a big picture view, a macro view of what it is and what it might be to come work and live in Sri Lanka. What we'd like to do with the panel that we have for you today is to perhaps provide a micro view, to hear some stories from returnees in terms of why they've come back and what they're doing, some of the opportunities they see, and also obviously some of the challenges that they have faced and hopefully overcome. So with that, I'd like to invite each panelist to come on stage. I will call them out and have them give a brief introduction about themselves and their company, and then once everyone's on stage, we will get into the panel discussion. So to start with, I'd like to call upon Bridget Durr from WSO2.
Now it is. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Bridget Durr. I am a Swiss native. I'm born and raised in Switzerland, and I came to Sri Lanka some 7 months ago. I worked for IBM for the last couple of years, which is probably like 8 years. I've been doing various jobs there in strategic marketing, and one of the things that I did for IBM was I was a member of what they call CSE, which is Corporate Service Corps, which is actually sharing brain power with some emerging countries and emerging companies. And they gave me the great opportunity to come to Sri Lanka, and that's how I first met or got in touch with Sri Lanka some 3 years ago. I'm holding a degree in marketing and business economics, and what else is there to say? I'm actually right now currently working as a senior director in strategic marketing for WSO2 company, an IT company that you guys have heard this morning about. We're doing some great work in open source middleware. That's about it, I guess. Thanks.
Thanks, Bridget. So Bridget is representing the expat community, and I see a few expats in the hall as well, so hopefully we'll have some insights from you during the discussion. I'd like to now call upon Chandi Dharmaratne from Virtusa.
Thanks, Aj. So I studied in Los Angeles and worked in Manhattan prior to returning to Sri Lanka a decade ago. I was in the publishing industry and the service industry while in New York. After returning to Sri Lanka, I joined MAS Holdings as a management trainee in 2002. After a while, I moved into HR, and I left MAS this year as the head of group learning and development. I have been in the HR profession, gaining experience in many diverse areas such as talent acquisition, talent development, and talent engagement, to name a few. I'm currently responsible for the professional development and engagement of 2,000 plus very smart individuals at Virtusa as the Director HR for Virtusa. So Virtusa is a NASDAQ-listed company headquartered in Westboro, Massachusetts. It is a global information technology services company providing IT consulting, technology, and outsourcing services. Virtusa serve global 2,000 companies and the leading software vendors in banking and financial services, insurance, telecommunications, technology and media, information and educational industries. Virtusa was recently featured in 2012 Forbes list of 100 best public companies in America with a revenue of less than $1 billion. So I'm also passionate about developing the employability skills of local undergraduates, and as a result, I have worked as a visiting lecturer for many local universities such as University of Moratuwa, University of Kelaniya, University of Colombo, and Institute of Personnel Management in Sri Lanka. I have also participated in many forums and structured many programs to help young undergraduates who are studying overseas to get exposure to local operations that we have. And one such program that we've run over a decade is the MS Holdings Deutsche Bank and Dialogue Summer Internship Program. I'm extremely happy to be here, and I only hope that I inspire at least one person's decision to come back home. Thanks.
Thanks, Chandi. Next, Mr. Chandika Jayasundara, co-founder and CEO, Synergix.
Thanks, Arj. So I got my bachelor's from the University of London, and then worked briefly at, not briefly, maybe 2-3 years, at Virtusa, which most of you have heard a lot about. And then I moved to Australia to pursue a master's degree at the University of Melbourne. And then at that point, after finishing my master's qualifications, I was involved in university research and also was working in the technology industry. And after a while, I with some more people, started off a company called Synergix, which builds a product called Creately, which is a diagramming software on the cloud, which helps people draw flowcharts, mind maps, and various design diagrams. We right now, the product is being used by over 500,000 people, and we are very fortunate to have customers from small businesses from 130 countries to large influential organizations like NASA, US Department of State, Amazon, Cisco, eBay, and a large number of companies. And most of the work, almost all of the work for the product and marketing and design is being done in Sri Lanka and by Sri Lankans, which I'm quite proud of. And we've been able to build a great a known brand outside of the Silicon Valley, right here from Sri Lanka. So I might be able to share some perspective on that today, and I hope I can help inspire someone else, some more people to come and start up companies in Sri Lanka.
Thanks, Chandika. Next, Dr. Dinesh Arnathilaka, Head of Integrated Technology Services, IBM.
Thanks, Aj. Good morning, everybody. I am a product of Nalanda Vidyalaya, Colombo, and went on to do my BSc at University of Colombo. I was one of the first batch of students who did computer science from a vision of Dr. V.K. Samaranayaka, and I'm very happy that I was one of the members of that first batch, which was only 24 students. Then I went on to the industry because I never wanted to become a programmer because my likes were different. So I went to industry as a management trainee. I started at Haley's and went on to do my MBA at PIM, University of Sri Davadanpura, and then was working at Suntel as head of business development before I went to Australia, New South Wales, Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, accompanying my wife, who happens to be a lecturer at University of Colombo School of Computing. There I was lucky to get a scholarship to do my PhD as well from University of Western Sydney and returned back in January 2007. Since then, I have worked at Dialogue, Informatics, and currently I'm working at Head of Integrated Technology Services at IBM Sri Lanka. IBM Sri Lanka has been established in 1962. It's a 51-year-old company in Sri Lanka, I think one of the oldest IT companies in Sri Lanka, and IBM itself is the oldest IT company in the world, which was established in 1911, 102 years old. And I'm very happy to be back in Sri Lanka, and I'm also involved in part-time teaching at University of Colombo School of Computing for master students, and willing to help anyone who needs to have any conversation on returning to Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dinesh. Mr. Eranga Jayawardena, Director at MAS Intimates.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eranga, and I first want to thank Nayana for doing this. Nayana and I, we became friends back in 2005 or 2003, and he was very passionate about doing something like this, which he started with SL2 College, and then now it has evolved into working in Sri Lanka. I have a lot of pictures of Nayana during school days, which I can share with anyone who's interested. As for me, I came back to Sri Lanka about 3.5 years ago. And one of the main reasons I came back is because of kids who pretty much run my life now. But as for my professional background, today I work at MAS Intimates as their director for sourcing and supply chain, as well as I'm also involved in their innovation, both at the holdings level as well as at the Intimates level. Little about MAS, it's a $1 billion company in Sri Lanka. We manufacture apparel, mainly active as well as lingerie. And we support 60,000 Sri Lankans with their livelihood. The second biggest employee in Sri Lanka after the Sri Lanka Army. Very proud to be part of the MAS culture as well as their family, which is very much similar to what I have experienced in my experience at Apple, Cisco, as well as the United States government. I went to US in early 1998 and was educated at a private engineering school called Rensselaer, then went on to do my master's at Stanford, and then of course worked in the Silicon Valley and have had my share of failed startup experience as well, which I think has helped me progress in my career. And again, thank you very much for having me. Hopefully what I have to share will be of some use to you sitting out there. Thank you. Thanks, Aj.
Thanks, Saranga. And finally, Mr. Hiran Emuldania, Director, York Street Partners.
Hi, morning everyone. So just a minute about myself and then a minute about what I'm doing in Sri Lanka. So I grew up in Sri Lanka and left here to do my further studies. I went to Oxford University and completed a master's in engineering there, following which I joined Goldman Sachs in the investment banking team. So I didn't have much of a life for a number of years in London where I was doing that, and then decided to take a break and do an MBA, which I did at Harvard Business School. After finishing that, I wanted to be back in this part of the world, so I came to Dubai, joined McKinsey, which was a large strategy consulting firm, worked there for a number of years until the situation here changed, and then have actually been in Sri Lanka now for the last 2 years. So today I work with York Street Partners. York Street Partners is a company that we started 2 years ago with a group of people who all came back to Sri Lanka. And the idea was to somehow create a advisory sort of cross-hybrid between a Goldman Sachs and a McKinsey, but focusing on Sri Lanka. So our sole mandate is to focus on advisory work in Sri Lanka, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. Thanks.
Thanks, Hiran. So we've got not just a good-looking panel, but certainly a number of folks with very interesting experiences who've either decided to come to Sri Lanka or to return to Sri Lanka, who've either come back and started a bunch of companies or come in and started working for either mid-size or very large organizations. So I think a good cross-spectrum of folks on this panel. I'd like to start with the fundamental question of what brought you to Sri Lanka or what brought you back to Sri Lanka. So if you can give us some perspective on what some of those drivers, that would be great. Bridget?
Okay, what brought me to Sri Lanka? I guess, first of all, my love to Asia. I really wanted to work and live in Asia. And after I've been here for the first time, I really fell in love with the country, with its people, the friendliness. I mean, the country, as some of the speakers this morning have been pointing out, is amazing, the scenery. It's, of course, as well, totally different to my home country, Switzerland. And yeah, I just fell in love with Sri Lanka, basically, and I really wanted to come back. And after a few years, I got the opportunity, and here I am.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, few reasons, but more than everything, before we went, my wife and I decided that we will definitely come back. But at the time when we wanted to return, late 2006, a lot of people were asking the sanity of that decision because, as you know, 2006 was war years and a lot of bomb scares and things like that. And my eldest kid was about 8 years old, so a lot of people asked whether it. So we said we have lived with this from the day, actually from 1983 onwards. So we wanted to come back. But the very reasons that we came back was partly family and partly to give a cultural heritage for our children, because we always wanted to be back to serve our mother country, but more than everything, we have seen children, Sri Lankan expatriate children in Australia, where I lived, in New South Wales, in Sydney, where actually they don't have a real culture. Because what we thought was that, you know, if we want to inculcate some of our culture in them, we need to let them grow up in our country. So that was one of the major reasons that we came back. Thank you.
For me, the primary reason why I came back in 2002. Obviously, my parents were not very happy with me coming back because of the situation in the country. So the primary reason I came back, because my father lived here, and after 10 years of living overseas, I kind of had a guilty feeling that I left him behind, and he actually passed away 1 month ago exactly today, and I don't regret that decision of coming back, because spending that time, quality time with your family and your parents, was important to me. And the second reason, actually, why I came back was because you get caught up in a rat race and you lose perspective of what your priorities are. And it really gives you perspective coming back home because you are with amongst your family and friends, and end of the day, it's where you were born. And the reason for leaving, actually, not my parents not liking me leaving, was the entire war situation in Sri Lanka. But in 2001, while I was in Manhattan, in 2001, 2 planes came and knocked Twin Towers, and 2,900 people plus some of my friends died within 2 hours. So that was, and America launched war on terrorism. So putting things into perspective, I really didn't see much of a difference in the situation I was in, and that kind of convinced my parents to let me come back. So personal reasons was the main thing for me.
I came back primarily driven by needs of the company because after we took on some initial investment, and we had the first thing that we had to do was actually expand our development team and grow the team. Australia was not the best place to hire the best engineers, and I had to argue the merits of coming to Sri Lanka versus India, because elsewhere India is known as the IT hub of the planet and the way to get good things done. But as in, even if you putting your patriotism aside, if you look at why Sri Lanka is a great destination for someone who's trying to start a technology-related company or do anything around technology, is that there are amazing people here, and a university system that's growing, and is actually putting out very high-quality people out, and you are not competing with Google or Facebook to hire these people into your organizations, and you can retain them for a longer time. So that was that was a very easy decision to make and come back here. And my objective was to come here and set up the initial team, get the product rolling, and go back after about 6 months to 1 year. But after I came back, it's home in many ways, and it's preferable to live here because of what the culture is, because of your food, because of family and familiarity, and the fact that you can get to anyone with the network that you can build here, and everything is far more accessible in that sense. So when you look at as a place to live, Sri Lanka has improved from the time I came back in 2008 to now. It's amazing how much we have grown, and when you think about the livability of Colombo and its surrounding regions, it's increased tremendously. So it's a great place to live as well as do business.
Well, I've been asked this question many times, and I used the answer, kids is a reason we came back. Because when I did, I had an 8-month-old, and we found out that we're going to have another one. So that's a reason I give everyone who asks that question. But to be very fair, that's an excuse. We've been very happy for the last so many years that we've lived here. I can safely say without any reservation that I never unpacked my bags when I went there. I always felt more comfortable in Sri Lanka. I think the panelists pretty much said it. It's a cultural aspect. It's a fact that I could relate to more people here. It's a fact that I am more with them than where I was before, whether it's the East Coast of the United States or whether it's the West Coast of the United States. I never unpacked my bags. The day I unpacked my bag was the day I came back to Sri Lanka. From neighbors to, even though they're little, they'll get on your business, you kind of enjoy it once in a while. So that's the reason, because I always felt I belong here, could relate to the people as well as the environment here, and also the fact that all the other things the other panelists mentioned. And that's the primary reason why we came back.
So I think in my decision coming back in 2011 was a relatively easy one compared to what you've heard from some of the other panelists. I think Chandi and Dinesh coming back right in the midst of everything going on, and you heard from the governor this morning. When he was drawing out the vision for Sri Lanka back in 2005, it was a very different place. So certainly 2011 making the decision to come back was a relatively straightforward decision. And for me, I think it was really the opportunity to come back and do something exciting. I mean, my entire sort of life and training had been in sort of investments and providing advice, and then seeing the opportunity to do that in Sri Lanka and building a bridge between Sri Lanka and the outside world was certainly the biggest driver. The second thing that happened in 2011 was a conversation with 3 other close friends from different parts of my life, one from high school, one from business school, one from work, who all were thinking about doing the same thing or already had taken steps to do the same thing. And so it was a nice sort of coincidence or serendipity that we all happened to be thinking about along the same lines at around the same time. And then the third factor was in 2011 I got married, and my entire life was in upheaval. My singledom was gone. Life as I knew had changed, so why not throw one more change into that mix? So that was what prompted me to come back.
Yeah. Change is good.
Change is good.
So what we're hearing clearly, there's very clearly for a lot of the panelists a strong personal driver to come back. Certainly some people never really left, as we hear it. Others, brought back by very strong personal reasons, and then through that professional reasons as well. A little bit different for you, Bridget, of course, more driven by the opportunity that you see in the region, and then working your way through into a sort of professional role and adding value here. So good mix of reasons for coming back. Folks in the audience, I'm sure, will also have in their mind as they're debating the timing. Some people may have got to that point of saying, yes, I'm ready to come back, but what's the right timing? But also others still moving in that path, clearly struggling with some of the trade-offs, some of the concerns. And I'd love to hear from each of you of some of the trade-offs that you felt you were making or some of the concerns, and also how maybe you have adjusted to those trade-offs and concerns now that you've been on the ground. And anyone start off with Hiran, since, yeah.
Okay, so my decision-making process that I do with lots of things, I kind of took a traditional, training that I was given at McKinsey and started, putting everything down into lists and, pros and cons and all of that. And then, started talking to lots of people about this as you would normally do. And actually the most telling conversation I had was with a friend when I was on holiday in Istanbul. And this was a friend who had known me for a long time, and he said, listen, Hiran, you seem to be struggling with this. You're giving me all the reasons for and all the reasons against. But sometimes with these difficult decisions, it's not so much about the head, but also about the heart. And somehow, with some of these important life decisions, you have to lead with the heart. And so that conversation made it very clear for me what I needed to do.
My turn. I think I agree with him wholeheartedly. I didn't have a list. I don't have one now either, but it came from the heart. Lots of trade-offs. Apple was doing great when I left Apple. Its stocks just was skyrocketing, and I decided to leave. Do have regrets waking up every morning, looking at the stock price now saying, oh, what did I do? But having said that, quality of life cannot be measured by the number of zeros in your bank account. For some people, it may be, but for me, it's not. So that's the reason I came back. And yeah, I mean, there are few regrets financially, sure. But at the end of the day, I think we made the decision. It was just not me. My wife and I both did to come back because we made that decision with our heart. And I'm very happy to say that it's the right decision.
So yeah, completely agree with you guys. It's a decision from the heart, not really a list of check boxes to tick, saying I'll have these things when you go back. And as in my situation was twofold. It was commercial, and personal. Speaking from a personal perspective, obviously there are. I was single at the time, so I had very little things that I would miss. in elsewhere. Just that you might have your your favorite donut or something, little things that make life nicer elsewhere. But then you gain so much when you come back because the familiarity, because of this is what you've grown up with, and these are the things that you've always loved, and then you very clearly miss when you're out of Sri Lanka. So, as in, it's not a question of what's better and what's worse. It's a matter of what matters to you personally, and usually I know most Sri Lankans in here or elsewhere, will when you see the potential, when you know what you really want in life, you'd pick to be here because it's home.
So trade-offs wise, I actually saw this, I read this somewhere. If you take some risks, you might just find what you're looking for. So it was a risk at that point, but I definitely think I found what I'm looking for. So one thing in life is like, you can't really look back, you can't compare living overseas and living in Sri Lanka in your homeland. It's not apples to apple comparison. So from a trade-off perspective, I made up my mind when I decided to come back. I'm never going to look back and ever wonder what it would have been like. So you have to make a decision and just stick to it after you make that decision. So that's how I just adapted. And even when I started working, I adapted to every situation and didn't really look back to see was I ever making any trade-offs. So the decision was much more overpowering than any trade-offs that I could see.
So for me, actually, trade-off was, at the time I returned, the uncertainty here and the instability of the situation where I was in a very stable and certain situation. So it was a trade-off, but I thought certainty or uncertainty will not be there forever. They'll be. So I'm very happy I came back because from that day, from 2009 onward, it has been a very wonderful living in Sri Lanka, no issues. So I'm very happy about that. And also, some of the trade-offs would be that, a lot of people told me that, education of your children would be much better in other countries than in Sri Lanka. But I don't actually think so, because I think education can be got in Sri Lanka because we ourselves were here. But more than that, if we don't give our children the cultural heritage, they'll be lost in their lives. So that I thought was something that I need to do, and that is the very reason why I came back, and I thought that is very much plus for many other minuses that to make my decision at the time, and I'm very happy that I made that decision. Thank you.
Well, when it comes to trade-offs, I guess one thing that comes to my mind very quickly is the discussion I had with my ex-manager, my ex-boss at IBM, when after I just got promoted 2 weeks before, I went to see him and told him that I'm going to move to Sri Lanka and I'll leave IBM. So he was looking at me, staring at me like, okay, so did I miss anything? Is Sri Lanka the next IT hub, or did I just not get this point? And funny enough, we talk a lot about Sri Lanka being a next hub in these days. Basically, what a lot of people probably were curious about is, not only here in Sri Lanka, but also in Switzerland, is how can you move from one of the biggest, most recognized companies in the world in Switzerland, where you have a very comfortable life. How can you move from IBM Switzerland to WSO2 Sri Lanka? Well, my answer is probably very similar to all of you. It's a decision of your heart. I just really wanted to be part of what has been discussed this morning. I wanted to be part of a country changing, and a country, achieving so many things. Only the last 6-7 months that I've been here, there so many great things happened, and I just wanted to be part of it. So here again, it's the same reason as all of you. It's a decision of the heart.
Right. Thank you. And I think one point to pick up, Chandi, on that idea of not continuously, if you move back, not continuously living in a mindset of comparing, because the lives are very different. And if you get caught in some kind of paralysis of saying, oh, it was so different there, or the buses turned up on time there and they don't here, it just doesn't work. So you have to kind of make that break in one sense and say, I'm here, let's make the best of it, I think is probably something. And on a personal note, trade-off, something that we hadn't anticipated is just there's a lot more people involved in your life when you come back to Sri Lanka, from your mother-in-law to everyone else. But I have to say I'm very thankful she is, because she helps look after the kids. So if you're listening, hopefully, thank you. But let's talk a little bit about from a professional perspective as well. Each of you are now either leading teams or you're building companies. You've come from environments where maybe you take certain talent or certain levels of, let's say, professionalism for granted. People have been, there's a larger base on larger established firms that you could have drawn from, or you have been trained through. You are now coming here with certain expectations and you want to maybe build to those standards or exceed them. Challenges around that, frustrations around that, and also maybe some of the surprising positives having come here and started to create and build. Ranga, we'll start.
Yeah.
We'll,
Is it a hot potato?
yes.
Okay. So I think my view is I got very lucky. I think I ended up getting a good job at a good place. But I've also heard of people who came back with me who was not so lucky. And what I want to share is that you have to respect the culture here. Just because you come from somewhere else doesn't mean that you're better or you can make a change. You just need to respect people here who you work with, both your superiors as well as the people who work for you. The reason being is if you respect the culture, take a step back and understand what's going on here. After all, things didn't fall into place overnight here either. There was a lot of hard work put in there. So don't try to make changes as soon as you get in here. Take the step back and make observations. See how you can make a difference. And coming back, especially from a different industry, maybe from a different culture, it will definitely help. But if you're part of the whole system, you probably can make a bigger difference. But if you're trying to influence it from the offset, people may not see you as a change advocate, but rather as a bull in a china shop. So to me, it worked out really well. I was able to take a step back and see how things were, and then insert some of these ideas which got embraced. And it's amazing to find out the amount of learnings that you can get from them. And to me, that has been my experience and my success here.
Yeah, sorry. So it looks like Irang and I have sort of shared the same notes for the pre-questions. So for me, it's exactly the same again in the sense that the biggest lesson I've learned in sort of coming back is that you really have to still work very hard, and maybe doubly hard. Doubly hard because you have learned and you've acquired a number of skills which you can come and put to good use, but that good use will only come not through a sense of entitlement, but through sheer hard work, and then the recognition will follow. So, it's taken us 2 years in building the company that we're building, and, we all came in with great CVs, etc., but really the sheer hard work and determination to get where we are today, is still sort of in the workings. And so I kind of refer back to, I don't know if you all have seen this movie, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, and there's a scene where Dev Patel in that movie sort of You know, it's a lot of chaos around him. He's trying to work really hard and do his best, but it doesn't seem to be all coming together. And he says, you know, in the end, everything will be okay. And if it's not okay, it's not yet the end. So you have to keep some faith and keep working hard and keep plugging away.
Yeah, so from starting a business and running it perspective, as in things do get done here, and things have been getting done for a while. So you just have to adapt, and then the level of efficiency or from maybe when you have touch points with the government or regulatory bodies, they might not be at the same scale or level, but as in there's a way. There's always a way, and the way we solved these problems were basically, you know, as in coming from a very a structured business practice, countries where you have very structured business practices and government regulations and so on, it can be frustrating for you to work with on a professional scale or even on a personal, for personal needs. So what we did was we got people who know how to handle them to help us. And so that decision to hire the right help has paid off tremendously in relieving us of lots of stress as well as saving a lot of time. And so as both of these guys said, it's basically you don't have to fight the system, you have to just work with the system, and there's so much more change you can make as you grow. So one of the trade-offs that we had when we came back and we started doing stuff here is that the exposure to the markets that we want to sell into, and the pace of business and the pace of work that we usually are used to versus what the local talent is used to. So there's a constant amount of education and uplifting that you can do, and even within your organization or outside, which we are quite involved with SLASCOM and so on, to help people really grow their skill base and really open up their mindsets, open up their peripheral vision of what the world is. Because usually we've had this saying that we Sri Lankans have an island mentality, and you know, everything revolves around us and so on, which is true, and it's quite deep in there. But with, for example, a technology company like ours or in the high-tech industry, it's very easy for you to go online and belong to the wider world. So that sort of education and that sort of thing is happening across most industries and most individuals, and from the school level up to universities and higher levels. So that sort of thing actually helps grow the ecosystem that you can exist in, but it won't happen overnight. So you have to have some expectation that it'll take time, but you can be an agent of that change. And I think at a personal level, that's quite rewarding as well, for you to be able to contribute to bring up the country itself by helping individuals one at a time.
So from a professional perspective, I agree with everyone. I also think that you have truly global companies in Sri Lanka. I mean, you've got companies like Virtusa, you've got companies like MAS Holdings, and you've got truly global operations. And actually, they operate, although based locally, from a very global perspective. The visionaries have to envision the future of the organization from a global mindset. They're playing in a global playing field. Customers are JP Morgan Chase to British Telecom to Aetna, and I'm sure from MAS, Victoria's Secret, Nike, strategic customers. So although you're actually living here, you're working in a very global framework. So for me, that, yes, culturally there are differences working in Sri Lanka and working overseas, but from a professional perspective, it gets the job done. And your organizations are very global. The leadership is local, but global mindset because you're negotiating with foreign customers from the best companies in the world. Infrastructure, if you walk into any of these companies, are actually better or equal to any global infrastructure. So systems and procedures are also very global. So from a professional perspective, I see that local companies are becoming more and more very global mindset and very global in the way they operate. And at the same time, I agree with the peers and the employees that you will work with are also very global and very smart because through the summer internship that I've conducted for the last decade, for example, I've had interns coming in with full scholarship. These are Sri Lankan graduates coming in full scholarship from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, full scholarships. And you had local interns from Moratuwa, Colombo, Kelaniya in the same internship program. And the foreign graduates, the Sri Lankan graduates studying overseas, realize how smart the local graduates are also. So they work together in project teams, and they realize coming back home what kind of talent they have to work with and what kind of corporates they have to work with. So from a professional perspective, it could be a very enriching experience coming back and working home.
I kind of agree with everyone. And to add to that, actually, in Australia, I was an academic. Most of my working life there was as an academic. I taught in the university. But before going, I was doing a senior corporate position. And coming back, I was very lucky. I didn't have a job to come back. But I was very lucky. Within 1 month, I landed in a very senior corporate position in a large organization. I have no regrets because professionally I started in a very senior position and all that. But to add one more thing to the cultures of working in Australia and Sri Lanka. In Australia, most of the, although I have been an academic, I was a researcher, so I did research in 3 corporate organizations in Australia. What I see is that although there are teams, most of the people work as individuals. But in Sri Lanka, in teams, we have a little more of intimacy or a little more of knowing each other than in other countries, partly to do with our culture. And if you want to do something different, mobilizing one of those teams is very easy here than in there, because people will support you. If you really come out with the intention that you want to do, people will support you. We have done that. I have done that in 3 organizations I have worked after coming from Australia, thanks to my people, my teams that I have worked with. And it has given me a very satisfying experience, which I would think I would never have got if I was outside Sri Lanka.
Bridget, thoughts on adjusting to the culture and maybe trying to change it as well?
Well, I guess I was in a very lucky position because I came to a company which is very ambitious, which really offers some cutting-edge technology. But other than that, there is also a team behind that, because you can't have that kind of technology delivered without a team and engineers and people who are really putting their heart and soul into it. So the people in our company are very motivated, they're very ambitious, and yes, maybe you trade Swiss punctuality and global market approaches, but then what you do gain here is the passion of the people for their work, for what they do. I find people working 24/7, which I think is amazing, which I can tell you would not happen in Switzerland. So yeah, you gain certain things and then you trade other things. But yeah, so far it's been a great experience.
Right. And I think one important takeaway there seemed to be, don't fight the system. Just really come and understand it first, and then figure out where you can most effectively implement some change if you in fact you need to change anything. And I think that was a lesson for us also at originally opening up an office for a US consulting firm, and most folks know Americans are very quick, very fast, very direct, and then you've got to work with a team of analysts in Sri Lanka who are not as direct and don't say things or write things in the same way. So initially, there was an expectation that we can build the same US culture in the office in Sri Lanka, and that we tried for a few months and realized that's not going to work. So then you have to really start incorporating the best of what's elements of best Sri Lankan culture. There's a lot about loyalty, about willingness to go to crazy lengths to get things done, and then try to actually find a marriage between the two cultures. And I think what we have succeeded is to create something that's a blend. And now, interestingly, after 7-8 years, you start to see that, in fact, our ways are starting to seep into the US team as well. So I think we've now started to effectively find ways to influence and bring some of our working practices and culture to the US organization. So I think there's that certainly benefit as well. So don't fight the system. First learn about it. I think the other element that seems interesting, back to Chandi's point as well, is a lot of, I think pretty much all of you have come back or have come here and are working for organizations or have started organizations with a global perspective, with global clients. And maybe that's, again, as a takeaway for folks thinking about it, maybe that's a good way to ease in to working in Sri Lanka, is to find organizations that have those connections and networks that might be a good bridge. And then while you're on the ground, you may find then some very interesting local opportunities that are very different, but it gives you some transition period maybe to kind of make that adjustment as a takeaway. Folks, if there's any questions from the audience, feel free to raise your hand or pass it down as we near the end of this session. So if there's any thoughts, suggestions, comments, questions, please raise your hand, and do we have a mic, or we can maybe give one of these out?
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Smile. I live in New York, work in New York, been there for 25 years. My question actually is more of a quality of life related thing. Chandi, you brought it up. You mentioned the rat race in New York. I've lived in Manhattan, worked there. I know what it is like, what you were trying to say. You don't think it exists here?
I'm sorry?
The rat race?
Yes.
Now that Sri Lanka is making strides and getting there, do you think that the concept or whatever you mean by rat race, you do not think that it does exist here in the workplace? Please tell me, because I don't know.
I'm actually thinking, okay, I'll just tell you, I never really thought about it like that, right? But rat race, I meant was living in Manhattan. You get up in the morning, you get dressed, you go take the subway, you go to work, you come back home in the night. So for me, in that particular time of my life, I used to come back home late night, and then you're in the apartment, you go back to work the following day. So you cannot do that over and over and over again. And for me, maybe it's the same thing I do here, where I get up in the morning, I go to work, I come back home quite late, but the difference is I have my, now I have 2 kids. But the difference is even before I got married, if I'm comparing from that time frame perspective, I had my father with me. I had people who would just drop in to see me.
Unannounced.
Unannounced.
Yes.
I had my aunts who would have some almsgiving. There would be a wedding I have to go to. There would be, from a quality of, you never felt it, because you're in a rat race, if you want to compare it like that. But still, you're in a rat race and having a life at the same time. Distraction, no, so it's a rat, it's a rat race, but maybe distractions, but I felt more fulfilling going through the rat race, if you may so call it. It was more fulfilling, knowing that I haven't missed out on what matters to me. during the same time frame. I mean, I would have never met my husband living in Manhattan because you never had the time, to do anything. And so here it's, I feel like, I mean, honestly now, as a mother, living here, I have my citizenship, I can go back anytime. But it's a conscious decision that I want to live here because of all the things the panel said, my 2 children. I can go to work as a woman and not really, and as a mother, and know that my mother-in-law will drop in and my mother will be around, and you don't have to really worry so much so as you would living in the United States, where your kids will be in a daycare and you don't really, So balancing work life for me as a mother has actually been easier living home. So.
Anyone else on? Yes.
Sorry, I just have a follow-up. This is actually for Dinesh. Same on quality of life. You mentioned about the culture, and I grew up. I happened to go to the same school, somewhere in Kurundavatta with Arj, and where we were exposed to a lot of culture, and it was a great opportunity. And I was way back, 20, 30 years ago. What are the challenges when I see kids growing up now? I mean, are they exposed to the same culture that maybe you and I were exposed? What are the challenges with that?
They're not. I mean, as you said, they're not. If you compare our school days and my children's school days, are very different. I used to go by bus to school. And my mother and father didn't have any worries about it because the society was such that, we go and we come back. But in my children's case, it's a little different from that. We send them to school by a van rather than making them go in the public transport and all that. The society has evolved and society has changed. But still, being a Sri Lankan, knowing the culture of this country makes them, gives them a standing in the world. If I brought them up there in Australia, there are different cultures from. So I have seen kids there who have, although they are Sri Lankan, from Sri Lankan parents, they don't have a real cultural background or whatever, because that's the culture in Australia actually. Their friends are from many countries over, maybe from Bangladesh, India, Australia, Lebanon, like that. So my wife and I had a conscious decision saying that no, we wanted to give them that cultural heritage, and they can decide if they wanted to go back, because then they know what it is here and what is there. So the decision is theirs, not ours. But if we don't give that to them, that cultural heritage to them, then it's a problem because we have not done our duty. So that was my thinking, or my wife's thinking.
Prajit, sorry, you had a...
So basically that. I sent my kids on holidays to Australia. It's a 1-month holiday, school holidays. And I get a call 2 days ago from them saying, Dad, why did you move back to Sri Lanka? You were away for 20 years and you came back and, I'm enjoying it there. So I told them, you know what? If I came back there, they wouldn't see me during the day. I'd start work at 7 and come back home at 10:30. Here you get to see me. I come to pick you up from school. Malika is doing the lunch for you. So table's set. Banda is doing the gardens. So that's where I actually save a lot of time, because my rat race was when I wake up at 7, I finish at 10. On a weekend or Friday night, I'm here in the house, cooking for the weekend, along with my wife. So that was the rat race we were in. So basically, our quality time that we spend here today going to the beaches was spent there cooking, cleaning, and doing all the other things. And I think that's what defines the difference between here and there. Because I had a question for Bridget as well. If you Google today standard of living around the world, Switzerland, Sydney, all these places are right on top. And Sri Lanka is not even in the list. But then that's the quality for me, where I get to spend a lot of time with my kids here. As opposed to if I was there, I would hardly see them. So.
as I don't have kids, quality of life is a different thing for me.
Yeah.
Quality of life for me is next to my career and the work that I have to like, no matter how much it pays. I really want to go to work and like what I'm doing. But you know, we've heard a lot this morning about how Sri Lanka is going to be developed and how, you know, you're going to have a few more airports and greater streets and just all of that. For me, quality of life is to go out now every weekend, well, maybe not every weekend, but a lot of the weekends, and explore the Sri Lanka as it is now. I don't want to come back in 10 years, or I might come back in 10 years saying, oh, I have been to that beach where there was only one hotel, and by the way, it was crap and it had 2 cockroaches in my room. So that is kind of what I like about Sri Lanka now. I'm very confident it will change a lot, but I want to be able to look back and say, hey, I've been here before you even knew it was there. So that's my kind of quality of life.
Hi, I'm Vincent Fernando from Melbourne. This is a general question to any of the panel members. A lot of my colleagues in Melbourne and in Australia want to exit work. Similar to me, I have 45 years experience in civil engineering. And it's not that they want to come and work here, but they want to give their experience, knowledge, and education to development of Sri Lanka. So can you tell any of the panel members, suggest something for the people that who wants to exit the working environment in other countries and to come here and give the experience, knowledge for the betterment of Sri Lanka? Any panel members?
So we are hiring. As in the experience and exposure and all those values are desperately needed in Sri Lanka in most companies, as in almost all companies. And these don't have to be your 9-to-5 jobs, because as in most companies here are global companies with a very open mindset that would be happy to have a few hours of your day as an advisory role that is, well compensated as well, and you can spend the rest of your day on a beach if you would like so. But I suspect though, when most people come back here to exit work, they will find rewarding work here that they would want to spend more time actually working and contributing. But that's a personal choice. But from what I've seen, people who have come back with that mindset have gotten involved deeper and deeper inside their own companies and as well as industries and the community, and contribute a lot. And then it's end of the day, it's what makes you feel fulfilled. We spoke about the rat race. It's not a rat race if you're passionate about your work and you're feeling rewarded for it. And and even if it's a rat race, it's a lot better when you're on the race with your own people.
To add to that, actually, part of the agenda of working Sri Lanka is that trying to give that exposure to those people in other countries who want to come back to Sri Lanka. So I think you should be in contact with people like Naina. They will tell you exactly how to get involved with that. And also, as he said, I think a lot of companies are open-minded to get that experience back, because there are companies who want to change certain ways of their work. So experience in other countries is a welcome knowledge, so that, I'm not saying we have perfect systems in Sri Lanka, so we have to change certain things, and it's happening actually. Even the government is taking steps to now say, for instance, Western province, you can get your revenue license on the net, which we couldn't have thought of 20 years back. We had to be in the queue. So it is changing, and those people who are exposed to those systems can come back and give that knowledge back to the country, so that we can sort of can be a catalyst to change those systems faster, I would think.
And I think one of the challenges you might be alluding to is just people with your experience or in that mindset as well, in that stage of their career, maybe not having a clear idea of how they can come back and contribute, or what are some of the opportunities, and maybe creating some database of opportunities matched with individuals such as yourself who are looking to come back, who are looking to contribute. I think that's very much part of what's on the agenda of an organization like Work in Sri Lanka, SL2 College, but also industry bodies such as SLASCOM. And then also, I'm personally aware of a number of startups that could use some, let's call it parental guidance for lack of a better term. And I think so we should find a way to make those opportunities available and visible, I think will probably help address some of what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's what the people abroad wants to know.
Yeah.
And also that a smooth transition is very important to settle down in Sri Lanka. And that way that they'll probably bring their knowledge and experience, as I said earlier. And there are lots of people like me who wants to retire. I don't use the word retire. Nobody retires. You get older. And the important message is that the knowledge that you can harness from those people, enormous talent that they have, and they are willing to come here and give, as I said earlier, they don't want to work full time, but they are happy to work as a consultant or an advisory person to either to the government or a private organization.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Great, thanks.
How do you surmount problems like corruption and bureaucracy? Those stultify a person who wants to come down and resettle in Sweden.
Any take them? Corruption and bureaucracy.
Well, part of it is that somebody said earlier also, we can't fight the system, we need to adjust to the system. But as you said, that doesn't mean that everybody has to sort of cow down to corruption and all things like that. So we maybe as work in Sri Lanka as an organization, or some other organization should stand up to it and say that, okay, we need to reduce this. But when you come back, it's better to be part of the system and understand the system rather than trying to fight it, because then, of course, you are getting into a head-on collision kind of a thing.
My view on this is corruption and bureaucracy is going to be here. It's going to be everywhere in the world. May it be US, may it be Australia, wherever it is. Mainly Sri Lankan private industry, you actually don't find that, because they have an objective in mind. They are working, everyone is working towards serving that objective. So you actually don't see that as much, or in fact at all. But then again, if you take any other country in the world, those are problems. Those are universal problems you're going to face. And we just need to figure out a way to deal with it when we come across those situations.
And my experience, again, having met a number of people who've started companies and grown them very successful, and it is really refreshing to see that they have done it in an ethical way without being hindered by sort of that narrative of having to face bureaucracy or corruption. Now, again, it's there, and as you mentioned, you have to figure out when you come up against it, how do you avoid it and not fall into that trap. But it was refreshing for me to have met a number of people and say, wow, you've grown a very significant company and really not had to deal with or come across, or you found an effective way to cut through that. So, it is happening in a positive way. You have to figure out how to avoid, the folks who come knocking on your door, if at all. Yeah. You can also join the Lankan Angel Network. That's right. Yes. So there's one here and then one over. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is...
Oops, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Lakshan De Silva. I'm currently working in New York, and my question is coming at a much junior level. I graduated 3 years ago, been working there for 3 years, and I see like a general trend in most of our expats working there, the Sri Lankans. There's a certain progression. You do your bachelor's, then you work for a few years, then you do your master's, then apply for, in America's case, it's the green card. And then you get to that benchmark of deciding, should I go back or should I not go back? I feel like there's a progression towards it. And I wonder, like, with the recent developments in the country, that model has been either changed or is it still the same? Because I'm contemplating a few ideas and I'm stuck in this, like, I'm talking to people who are a bit senior to me who had a different scenario when they decided. And then I have people who are my age who are following the same scenario. And I have juniors who actually are still figuring it out. So any impetus any of you guys could give will be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Chandi, from the internship program or something that similar issues came up, is there something, yeah?
Yeah, Arch. So let me just put it this way. There is no right time to want to come back. I actually see that working here, I have seen a lot of graduates who have worked for a long time and have come back and are adding a lot of value and adding a lot of value to themselves as well and progressing really well in the corporate sector. And I've seen undergraduates who just graduate and come back and get the experience here or the exposure to what it's like to work, and then they go back knowing that they have this opportunity here, and they still stay back for a couple of years, and then they apply and come back. And right now I'm talking to 2 of my interns from 4 years ago, wanted to come back after going to well-known universities in the world. So I really don't think you need to really have that step-by-step approach, because it's the right step-by-step approach. It would depend on what you want. And getting exposure there, doing a master's, staying there for a couple of more years if you want to, and knowing when you want to come back is the right decision, I think. But one thing that I would advise is, I mean, this summer internship, we've had about 200 students going through this internship, and last year I had about 6,000 applications to get into this internship, and we picked only 20. So you can see how many foreign, and these are not just the foreign local graduates studying overseas, local graduates as well in Sri Lanka. So you can, but there is a huge number of undergraduates who apply from all over the world to come back to Sri Lanka in July and spend 2 months, 1.5 months to 2 months in getting exposure to the best operations in Sri Lanka. So I would say you can make a very intelligent decision if you get yourself exposed to the opportunities that Sri Lanka has through an internship, through networks that you have, going and staying there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, doing a project, because most of the local operations have offices overseas as well, and then make that decision when you think it's the right time for you. I think that's what I would advise.
We can take a couple more questions. There's one there and one there. If we can.
I have a question where even if you take the decision to come back, finding a job and getting a work permit sorted has become almost, it's like a nightmare. So what advice would you give when you have to find a job? Because it's more about contacts if it's a senior role, and even if you get the job, it's about getting the work permit is another extra mile to go. So because if you're not a Sri Lankan citizen. So what advice would you do to overcome these barriers?
Questions around if you're looking to come back, senior role, and if you're also non-Sri Lankan, getting the work permit, sort of how would you work through that?
My experience is, bottom line is that, again, as Chandi said, networks do help a lot. And with working in Sri Lanka, putting that platform together, you will find out the opportunities that you have in Sri Lanka, may it be senior or junior or entry-level positions. As for work permits, we have enough and more expats working for blue-chip companies in Sri Lanka, and they're more than happy to sponsor you, to bring you down here, and to make sure that you have the right work permit in order to work here. I think Chandi can probably speak more volume to this. HR departments do take care of those matters quite often. And as for finding jobs, again, you can do it through networks. You can, Sri Lanka, working in Sri Lanka, putting up a site for it, as well as there are other positions or the other sites that these blue chip companies advertise, which you can go visit and look for opportunities?
Yeah, Rang is right. If anyone is interested to come back, I think network is important. But at the same time, I think you can do your own networking. For example, corporates are quite, visible. I mean, if you know one person, you kind of know how to make yourself known in the other companies as well. So once you figure out where you want to work and what you want to do, I think the work permit and things like that could be sorted out by the HR department.
Just to add to that, couple of experiences. One, when we started Stacks, the office here, as a branch office of a US company, the first 6 people we hired, just so happened 2 of them were non-Sri Lankan. Now, we hadn't planned on that, we hadn't anticipated that, we hadn't thought about it, but we didn't have a large pool of consultants or people who came out of strategy consulting to draw from, and 2 people happened to be in Sri Lanka for personal reasons. And we were a startup, so we weren't a large organization but we went through that process and we had to prove, look, these 2 people have the right skills for this particular time, and they will help train the rest of our team as we look to grow. So we were able to then justify hiring those 2 people as part of that initial 6 as a new starting operation. So you can justify it, you find the right reasons. You have to get somebody to be willing to bat for you in that respect. The other thing I'll say on networks, one thing we find is now there are some very effective headhunters. So if you don't have your personal network, you should definitely try to plug into one of those headhunters who then have always a pulse on the different opportunities, and they can try and match you up. So I think that's one way to try to bridge that deficit on the networking side. So, question at the back there. Thanks for the question. Yes.
Hi. Hi, my name is Lanka. I would like to ask a question. Now, when we come back, if you want to do a startup company, like, how do you find angel investors or entrepreneurs? Like, now we have work in Sri Lanka. Can we have something like entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka or angel investors in Sri Lanka? It will be much more easier for us to go and find the capital that we need. So what can you say about that?
If I can take that one question first and then throw it out. I happen to be part of the Lankan Angel Network, which the gentleman who founded it is sitting right here. If you need, he may have brought his checkbook with him today, I'm not sure. Don't let him get out of the room, just talk to him. But the idea was exactly that how do you start to create that ecosystem to enable entrepreneurs to come in, and with second year anniversary, and we've looked at a bunch of different companies, have entrepreneurs come in and pitch, and funded 14 companies been funded through that as a start. So I think that's one. Then anything else to add or think from entrepreneurial side, funding?
Yeah, there's a lot of activity around entrepreneurs and starting up here. In fact, SLASCOM has a vision of 1,000 startups by 2020. And there's a lot of work that's been done around it. So funding is part of it, and build the ecosystem, building the culture. We run hackathons a lot. We we work at every level, from school to universities to existing employees in large companies, to encourage people to start their own, help them find funding, help them find mentorship, and so on. So, I think right now is a good time to start, because things are moving and things are moving fast.
Hiran, will you add to that as well because of
So just a quick comment, and I'm glad somebody asked the question about entrepreneurship here, because I think that's one of the real opportunities in Sri Lanka today. Is the way to come in and bring something that you have learned from outside, or a skill that you've developed, to put it to good use here and actually develop a business right from scratch. And I think, as Aj explained, there is an ecosystem that's being developed to help those type of individuals, and I think that's only growing. And right here on the panel, you have a couple of guys who actually set up companies from scratch, and we're only one of a few, and there are many, many more examples. So it's an exciting time to come and try your hand at something quite entrepreneurial.
And if I'm correct, Hiran, York Street Partners is also involved in helping even later stage, growth stage companies look for funding and things like that, right?
Absolutely. So, and one of the couple of things that we're doing at York Street Partners is as companies grow through that evolution from angel, through land, and then grow up into revenue positive and have some profitability, then one of the things that we do is actually look at some of those ideas and try to find the next stage of capital, whether that's venture capital or actually more private equity as well, to help companies finance their growth.
Okay, great. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Right, so we're going to wrap up. In closing, I'd like to ask each of you to, now that you've been back either a number of years or a few months, anything that you would have done differently, or anything that you would have thought of differently about moving to Sri Lanka? And with that, any sort of parting words or advice to folks in the audience with that question in their mind?
Okay, so I'm going to refer back to the earlier conversation that we had about some of the challenges that you anticipate coming in, and certainly one that I didn't anticipate coming in was just how difficult it was going to be to break into this market. We came into a market which was, for us, a fairly wide space. So in terms of pure play advisory companies operating in Sri Lanka, we looked across the board and we said, well, there's a handful, but really at a sort of a level that we wanted to play at, it was a fairly open market. But even that, and even with the team that we had, and we had a very, very strong team that came in, so it wasn't just one individual, it was actually a group of individuals, the time it takes and the amount of hard work you have to put and the investment that you have to put into that to really start getting traction is tremendous. So, even after 2 years, we're still just scratching the surface of what we can be doing here. The thing that, though, is extremely satisfying is the fact that, once you've done that and made that investment, the recognition will follow. And whether that's, people starting to pick up the phone and calling you rather than you having to call people, whether that's, being asked to be an advisor on, important situations, whether that's, reading about your transaction in the newspapers, right? That recognition will follow, and you believe in that because of the skills that you have already been trained in and that you bring with you as you come to Sri Lanka. But it certainly is not an easy road, and it's going to be, I guarantee you, a lot harder than you imagine it to be.
I do agree with Hiran because it's personal. For me, it was personal, and I think those who want to come back need to think about what they value and what they really want. I think Sri Lanka has a lot to offer, maybe in the IT field. We are planning to be a logistic hub as well, so there's going to be a lot of opportunities for those who want to come back. But again, my view is that you need to know what you want. What worked for me is not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for your friend. So you got to sit back and decide whether this is what you want, and the values that we have here is something that you can relate to. The moment you can draw on that, then the decision is going to become easier because the opportunities are going to be there. And then once you do make that decision, you have to come and blend into the network here, blend into the society here. And through that only, you can be a change agent. That has been my experience. And as for would I change anything about the way things happen for me? I think the answer is no. Because I know that there are other opportunities out there for people to come back, and it's just the way that you receive it and your reception towards it that makes the difference.
So on things that I would do differently, actually nothing. I think everything worked out fine. And with the key takeaway of why you should come work in Sri Lanka now is that Sri Lanka is growing at a pace. In the last few years, it has grown so much, and we can, you can see how much potential there is and how much growth that we can expect as a country in the next few years. And when you're part of something that is actually growing really fast, you yourself can grow much better and it's a more fulfilling feeling when you're part of something that's bigger, that's growing, and you're helping it. to grow as well. So I think even for personal reasons or even for patriotic reasons, it's the right time to come back and work in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is growing and so can you with it.
So about coming back, I honestly believe more so than ever, Sri Lanka has such a lot of opportunities, such a lot of great global opportunities for students to come back after they finish. I mean, it doesn't really have to be right after they graduate. I think any point of time to come back and still have a really great global exposure right here at home. And I have seen in the past 10 years where I've worked and mentored a lot of these undergraduates and graduates who have come back, I see that they are having really fulfilling careers right now in Sri Lanka. So even more so than the time that I came back, I think for me, it's like a no-brainer to decide to come back at this point in time to Sri Lanka. Also, if we are talking about all this, Sri Lanka going to the next level, what's going to happen, how can we make it work, and make it a better place for our children? I mean, who else should do that than us? So from those two perspectives, I think the decision to come back should be a very easy one.
As Eranga said, I think coming back is an individual decision. So you need to take that decision yourself. But maybe you can do a SWOT analysis and see what your values are, and you can balance the two sides and see which will help you to come back or which will help you to be there. From my side, if I had to decide now to come back, it would have been much easier, as Chandi said, because at the time I came back, there were a lot of uncertainties, but today it's very much more different. So I would have taken the decision very much easier if I had to make that decision today. So it's an individual decision, but today there are many more things that you can consider as pluses to come back than 10 years back or 5 years back. So, but the final decision has to be by the individual, and what you want to have in life, what you want to achieve in life, your family, your children. So it has to be a combination of all of that. So might as well do a SWOT and see which side you want to take up. Thanks.
I guess I want to take this really from an expat point of view, which is the advice I can give, I guess, is yes, it's going to be different. It's not the US, it's not Australia, and it's definitely not Switzerland. So be ready for that. It is different. But then there are very many good things about Sri Lanka. There are some obstacles. There are some things you might not like in the beginning. You might get adapted to them. You might never. But embrace the good things and live with the not so good things, because if you're looking back, that's the same thing. There are cool things in Switzerland and there are not so cool things in Switzerland. So it's the same wherever you are. So it's about making the decision where you want to live and then live with it.
Great, thanks. And sort of in closing, I think one other realization about having come back is that you don't necessarily have to, at least for me personally, don't necessarily have to agree with everything or the direction, or you may have differences in different political views or different economic views about how the country should be moving forward, but you can still live a very enriching and impactful life and do something in your own sphere, I think, and create something fundamentally, I think that to me has been most satisfying. So being able to find that balance and still be happy having made the decision to come back. So thank you so much, all of you, for your time and insights, and thanks for having us. And I believe it's, we might have kept you from lunch, so hopefully get started on that. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you found that discussion insightful and motivational, to say the least. I think it was absolutely fantastic to hear the many reasons as to why you should be in Sri Lanka, work in Sri Lanka, and call this place home. A few reminders and announcements. I would like to let you know that you could drop off your business cards outside at the registration table. And also, there are feedback forms in each of your packs. You could start filling it in now, and hopefully towards the end of the conference, drop it off at the box outside. For recent returnees, we did have a questionnaire, so if you have not got that questionnaire, please collect it from the table outside and fill it in as you go. Lunch will be served shortly, and I would like to ask you to proceed downstairs to the lower crystal room where lunch will be served. And appreciate it if you could be back by at least 1:45 p.m. so that we could start the next session. Thank you very much.